for something that wants to understand and makes your life a lot easier. So start with a little bit about myself. I am from Brazil. This is the classical Brazilian look. I'm married to an Irish Dutch girl, therefore the reason I'm here. 4.5 years working in Salesforce, currently working in Beethree, as I mentioned before, and I do not have a technical background. I do not come from a computer science degree. I did not know what an algorithm was when I started working with Salesforce. I was just curious, and I read a book, and then I read another book, and then I read another book, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So I moved from actually selling miniature boats into the Salesforce world. And recently I discovered the wonders of functional programming, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. Short agenda I wanted to talk about, a bit of history, a bit of Lightning, Redux, functional programming, and bringing it all together with a short demo. Bit of history. So who has been in the Salesforce world for more than a year? Yeah, more than a year. 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Anybody was around the time of S controls? So S controls was the first thing that Salesforce gave us for UI control, for user interface. Before Visual Force pages were there, we had S control, which were basically iframes. So it was a page inside a page. It was a very ugly technology, but that was the first thing. That's how it all started. Then Visual Force came. After Visual Force, Salesforce gave us a thing called remote functions, which is basically, it lets you call Apex code from your JavaScript code in your pages. After that, Salesforce gave us remote objects, which is basically, I will give you the ability to create your own, to bring your own framework, and you can bring React, you can bring Angular, you can bring whatever. But Salesforce never had a real single page framework, single page application framework, SPA. And Lightning came. Lightning was great. It is great. You get client rendering processing, so if you don't know what client rendering, client processing is, every time you do an action, Salesforce doesn't have to send the whole page back to the server and then get that back. It's just a little bit that gets sent, and most of it happens in your computer. It's very modern, it's faster, theoretically. It's component-based, and it expands possibilities, and it also gives you a decoupled backend. So the idea is that you don't really have what happens in your page so tied to the Salesforce servers, but a lot of it is basically decoupled. Don't really know how to explain the word decoupled, so I'll move on. Isn't that great? Yes, Parker Harris thinks it's great. Just hold on, right? If you really stop to think about it, you're like, Lightning gives you challenges because you need to start thinking of things that you never thought before. So with Visual Force, Salesforce used to hold us by the hand. Salesforce says, with this component, it will create a full page for you. Apex detail, it will give you the detail page of your current write. And then you need to start thinking, what is actually, should I put in the component? How do I structure a Lightning event? What goes in the helper, what goes in the controller? Get all these challenges that you never had to think about before. We don't have as much knowledge and best practices in the community. You start asking around, you're like, I don't really know. And this way, and this component, I do it this way, that component, I do it that way, I do not really consistent, how do I do this? Lightning is still evolving. Salesforce is still figuring out how to release Lightning to us. We as a community are trying to figure out how to do this. Here's to decide the best way. Apex developers don't know front-end development. If you don't know what Apex is, that's the language of the backend of Salesforce. It's a very different mindset when you code in Apex and JavaScript, which is the language that you do Lightning with. In JavaScript is a language that people are proud of when they do it wrong, which I think is very funny if you are a JavaScript. If you ever talk to somebody about JavaScript, you hear things like, oh, you can't believe the hack I did, and you're proud of it. And it's just, okay. It's just as a community, JavaScript is perceived as a weak language. because most people don't really understand how to use JavaScript. And a lot of enterprise developers think we need more jQuery. That's the solution to what will solve our problems. If you really stop to think about it, it's complicated. But believe in your dreams. So I'm going to talk to you about this thing called Redux, right? I'm going to talk about a few terms that are complicated, but in the end, I hope it makes a little more sense to you guys. So Redux is this thing created, this framework created by a guy called Dan Abramov, really intelligent guy, works for Facebook. And the idea is that a predictable state container. What that means is that it's easier to predict what's in my page, basically, or what's the state of my application. The state of your application is, for instance, if you, you have an input page, you have an input box and you write 5 on it, and then you click on a different tab, and then you go back, is your 5 is still there? That's like holding your state. And the motivation behind this is that JavaScript evolves really fast, and state management becomes really frustrating. State updates and their sync nature are complex, and it's just an attempt to make those changes predictable. So 3 principles that Redux work with. You have a single source of truth throughout your application or your component. State is read-only, and changes are made with your functions. Single source of truth, JavaScript object where your state lives. It's just a single place. If you know, oh, where is the value of my field account name? It's in a single place in the whole component, in the whole application. State mutations are triggered by actions. So given the state in an action, what's the new state? An action is a JavaScript object that contains a type and a payload. I realize that's a lot, and then I'm going to get into a little bit of demo to show you what that means. And reducers are pure functions that apply, that they take those actions, and they are the mechanism to create new state. So just this flow of how things work. You have your page, and then an action is like somebody clicks on a button, somebody highlights part of the page, somebody clicks on a text, and then that action gets sent to a function called reducer, and the reducer will update the page. And you have that flow of how things work. But how do I change stuff if stuff is read-only? Functional programming. Any functional programmers around? Nobody gets the joke, but Georgia gets the joke. So I'm not a functional programmer, so I'm not a functional programmer. I discovered this very recently, so once I discovered, I've been telling everyone about this. So 3 concepts. There are many concepts in functional programming, but I want to talk about 3. Functions are first-class citizens, so you basically can pass around functions between other functions and call functions. For instance, you have a parameter in your function called integer I, but not only can pass the integers, but you can also pass functions. And you can create anonymous functions that are created at a time just to be called and then forgotten. And then the concept of immutability, so you don't really change anything, you just create new things and forget about old things, basically oversimplifying it. So for the demo I'm going to show you 2 functions, map and filter. There's a lot more. So I just want to show you an example of how this works. So I am actually going to open this here. I'm going to open my JavaScript console. There you will see. Yeah. So I'm creating days a week as an array of days a week, and I allocate this in my console. So if I look again, what days of week is? Days of week is an array of 7 days, right? So if I call the function map, the map function will apply dot map for every day inside of that function, apply the function I'm calling to, and then return to me a new array. So if I do this, it basically took the date to uppercase, so it made it all in all caps, and it returns a new array. If I look again to days of week, that didn't get modified. I just returned a new array as a result of my function call, of my map call. And then I also have the filter call, which is basically, let me call days of week dot filter day. So here, day, every day that starts with T, return to me a new array with the days that start with T. And that will return to me Tuesday and Thursday. If I look again at days a week, it's still the same. I didn't modify anything. I just created new structure. This is basically, I'm not modifying anything. It's a lot more predictable because what I created is still the same. I just create new stuff, basically. Okay, going back to Salesforce. How does this translate to Salesforce? Right. Oh, sorry. Bringing it back to Salesforce, right? Think of your lighting component. Your lighting component is where you keep the attributes on level. So it's basically, you keep it in a single place and you pass it down to the other. The top level component contains a reducer, so basically a single function that takes all the actions and modifies the state. The single event is fired from different. The single event is fired from different components, and a top level component creates a new state. So that was a mouthful. So I want to actually go into Salesforce and show you an example of this. No time. So this is a Lightning component to log your working hours. The motivation behind this Lightning component was because we are working with entrepreneurs that want to be able to log their working hours, because as a law requirement, if you say to somebody you're going to work these hours, there's a relationship of worker and employee. But if they are able to log their own working hours, basically you're saying, well, you are your own employee and you decide when you work, and I give you work when you're okay. That was why we made this. Go into Salesforce. So this is a Lightning component. Basically, what it does is that, as I said, somebody can log their working hours per week. So I can look here this week. Sorry. This week, and I can log my working hours for every week. So here, I can say on the week 22, I haven't said when I want to work. I want to work on the Monday. And I said my slots, I'm only going to work Monday next week. It's like, it's summer. And
and you make your end time 5?
I can, yes. Well, why not 9? Right. So everything that is happening on this page is a single event. We don't differentiate. If you remember Lightning events, we don't create several events for everything that happens on the page, but only a single event. If you remember what I mentioned briefly about actions, just an event that says, this is what's happening, please give me a new state. And then if I click here, delete, it's actually something has been deleted. Please remove it from the page. And then you have a single piece of code that actually looks at those events and says, oh, actually, this is what I need to do. So I will actually look into the code with you. So this is a single, this is my top level component that we were looking at. It's basically, if you look here at my attributes, I have a week number, there's lots, and basically something just to say that my component has been initiated, just for the logic of the initiation work well. But really, what matters is the week numbers in the slots, which is basically when somebody's working, the week number in the slots. And then I have a controller. Controller has a single method called handle event that takes the event and it will look at the type of event that has been passed. And the payload is like, oh, it's the slot of number X has been removed. Please remove it from page. And then it applies functional programming concepts. For instance, here you have the filter function that I showed you guys. So basically, if the slot ID is different from the slot ID that is in the payload, you can filter that out from the page. Same thing with here, you have the map function as well, which are basically two functions that I have in this example. And basically the reason this makes it so much simpler for you to write your Lightning component is that you have a single event, have a single function that changes your whole state. Your whole state is living in the single place, which is the store, which is the top level component. You don't need to manage so much complexity as normal Lightning components, trying to define an event for everything you do, trying to manage state from multiple places.
Where do you create the event?
I can show you. This is an event, has a type, which is a string, and a payload as an object, and I can put everything I want in the object. So
Where do you create?
Oh, in the table row here, I have an example. Basically, create a Lightning event of type remove slot, and then pass the ID of the slot to be removed. And then the same thing, when I update something on the slot, create an event with the slot, with the values with the slot.
You attach this function to the button.
So the update slot is on the start time, every time I blur, and as well as in the remove.
How do you get to this page? Yeah.
Sorry?
How do you get here? How do you get here?
This page.
Yeah.
This is my code editor. It's my text editor. It's a different program. It's not Salesforce.
But you can, from Salesforce, click on the setup button.
Yeah. Salesforce gives you this,
Yeah,
which is the developer console.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing.
Yeah, so that code you kind of download it, you have it locally.
Yeah.
And you synchronize with the server.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. I synchronize it with the server, but I prefer to use it locally because I don't like the way it looks.
Yeah, this is too bright.
This is too bad. It's purely for aesthetical reasons. Right. So, things to consider. So, does anybody know what ES6 is here? Okay, so ES6 will only work on new browsers, so some of the syntax will not fully work. And this is one of many attempts. This is how the one that works for me to make Redux work in Salesforce. I've seen other people trying. I didn't like their way of doing it, so it doesn't really work for me. And you can use the component Lightning required to bring polyfills. You know what polyfills is?
But Lightning component doesn't force you to use it. By default, which JavaScript use?
I use the one in the browser, really. Okay, so it doesn't, Lightning components doesn't force you to use ES5 or ES6 or anything like that. But if you have a really big code user base and they might be using Internet Explorer, some of this syntax you needs to be adapted for Internet Explorer. Questions other than, yeah. I'm sorry if that was confusing. I have here, I will share all the slides as well as the code on GitHub, on the Meetup website. And thank you.